Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Em and today we are going to be doing my weekly wrap up. Though I think it's been maybe 2 weeks since I've done a weekly wrap up, maybe more. I didn't do very many in March and yeah, I don't even think I'm gonna do a wrap up for March. Just talking to a camera has not felt super appealing lately, and I read 17 books and recapping all of that sounds like a lot of work. So I'm just gonna skip it for March and we're gonna roll right into April. I have had a pretty good reading week for this first week of April. I am feeling really optimistic about my April reading as a whole. I think it's gonna go really well. To start off, I read A House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher. I read this in just a couple of days. I got the ebook from my library. This is horror. I am a baby horror reader. I just started reading it last year. I am still very much a wimp, and so I am very careful in which horrors I pick up, but T. Kingfisher is right in my sweet spot of it's a little bit creepy, it's a little bit unsettling. It's gonna be a little gross, but it's not, I don't know, it's not too much for me to read, if that makes sense. So this is a haunted house story about a woman named Samantha who is what is she? She's a bug scientist. I know it starts with an E, but I can't remember the whole word. Anyway, she's a bug scientist, and she's supposed to go do this archaeological dig, and then they find recent human remains at the dig site. So the dig is canceled. But she's already sublet her apartment, so she goes to stay with her mother for the couple of months. And she gets to the house, and it's the house that she grew up in. It was her grandmother's house, and now it's her mom's, and there is just something off with her mom. She's not acting the way she usually does. She's changed some things about the house that don't really track with who she is. And so basically Samantha's antennas are all the way up. And then it just goes from there. And I, as always, when I read T. Kingfisher, I really love her sense of humor, and it comes across so well in everything of hers that I've read so far. I just love that sense of humor is always there, even when the subject matter is creepy as opposed to cozy, because I've read both from her. I really like this. I gave it 4 stars. I think, I don't know, is it good when you compare it to horror as a genre? I don't know. I don't have a lot of experience reading horror as a genre, but for me, it was a good time, and it's the perfect mix of creepy and unsettling. So yeah, there's that. I also have a new appreciation for vultures and a new appreciation for bugs. However, if you have a thing about bugs, it gets pretty gross bug-wise in this. So just keep that in mind if you decide to pick it up. The next 2 books I finished, I'm not going to talk about in depth because these are for my Nebula project. I like to read the finalists for the Nebula novel and novella nomination. So I'm not going to talk about these too much because I hope to do a dedicated video just to the Nebula books. But I finally read A Prayer for the Crowned Shy by Becky Chambers. This is book 2 in the Monk and Robot book. A Monk and Robot book. So this is book 2 in that series, and it continues to be such a cozy time. I love Mosscap with my whole heart, but I'm a big sucker for a robot/AI situation, so I'm definitely not a unbiased reader in that regard. So I don't remember what rating I gave this. I think I gave it 4.25 or something like that. I know I didn't love it as much as I loved A Psalm for the Wild-Built. That one, the themes in that one resonated with me a little bit more than the themes in this one did, but it's still absolutely lovely, and I still tabbed quite a few quotes. So there's that. And then the other one is I Never Liked You Anyway by Jordan Corella. And this is a Eurydice and Orpheus retelling. So Eurydice and Orpheus, if you've seen Hadestown or you've listened to the music, you know how that one goes. If this is a new myth for you, the Cliff Notes version is they fall in love. And then Eurydice, for reasons, gets taken to the underworld. She dies, she's taken to the underworld. And Orpheus is so distraught that he journeys down to the underworld to bargain with Hades to get Eurydice back. And Hades is like, okay, fine, but you cannot look at her the entire time you are journeying out of the underworld. You look at her once and I get to keep her. And he says, fine, okay. And they go through this whole journey out of the underworld. And then they are at the exit to get back to the mortal realm. And Orpheus takes a step over the threshold and then turns around like a freaking moron to check to see if Eurydice is still there. And she goes back. It's a retelling that takes place when Eurydice and Orpheus are in college. Yeah, I said that right. And both music majors. And it's basically like if you took that myth and gave it a CW TV teen drama treatment. And I had a lot of feelings while I was reading this. And I'm going to try and save those feelings and I'll talk about it later. But I execution, I didn't love it. I didn't love it. But I'll try. Yeah, no. I read it. That was the thing that I read. Oh, and then I read one more book. I read Plain House by Ruby Lang. This is a romance. I think it's a novella. I don't think it's quite long enough to be a novel. And it was also okay. I don't love romance novellas. I think it's hard to build a believable romance in such a short amount of time. And I felt like this was pretty surface level. Didn't feel like I really got to know the two main characters as much as I would have liked, though I did like that they already had a history, so it wasn't like we were trying to build a relationship from the ground up. But it was just fine. She has another one in this series where I think the couple used to be married and has since either divorced or separated, and then they come together for romance reasons. And I might try that one still. Like, I'm not writing this author off, but I'm not super compelled to continue it on in this series because I believe all the books are relatively short. All right, so that's what I finished. Now, what I am currently reading, I am reading Fresh Banana Leaves, Healing Indigenous Landscapes Through Indigenous Science by Jessica Hernandez. This is my self-destructing TBR book for April. This is nonfiction about why Western conservation doesn't work and why we need to listen to Indigenous people if we want to save the planet, basically. I'm tabbing a lot. There's a lot of good quotes. And I'm about, 20% of the way through. I do think it's a really worthwhile read. I think if you are doing any anti-racism reading for yourself, I think adding this in is really helpful because she does talk about how like the caste system that exists in the United States. We talk about how it impacts Black people a lot, but I haven't read very much discourse about how people who are capped under the Latinx umbrella, I haven't read very much about how it affects those people. And I didn't know that Central and South America also have a caste system and white supremacy is really rampant there as well. And I just didn't know any of that. So I think it's really, really worthwhile reading if you come into it as an anti-racist reading, but I will continue to update as I go. because I'm definitely going to finish it, because obviously there's been a lot of worthwhile and important knowledge. The next one I'm currently reading, I'm a little mad about this one. I feel like I got duped into reading literary fiction, which is fine. Sometimes I really like literary fiction, but literary fiction is sad, and I'm not guaranteed a happy ending, which I don't like. Not that I'm guaranteed a happy ending with sci-fi or fantasy, but there's usually the bad guy getting their comeuppance and the good guy prevailing. But I'm reading The Bandit Queens by Perini Schroff. This is Noelle's pick for the Silly Goose Book Club. I'm a little over halfway through. I actually need to move my bookmark because I already owned the audiobook, so I just have the library book in case I want to read with my eyes. But the audiobook's really good. It's the same narrator who does the Daevabad trilogy, and I really like her voice, and I like how she narrates. And this is set in a village in India. Our main character, Geeta, her husband disappeared 5 years before the book starts and just vanished. And the people in the village think she murdered him, but they don't obviously have any way to prove it. And she didn't actually murder him, but because he just disappeared, she doesn't have any way to prove that she didn't murder him. So she's been ostracized in the village, and she lives alone, and she's pretty lonely, and you know, she doesn't have any children, and so the other women her age are all married and have children. So she's just left out of a lot of things, and there is an incident, and one of the women in her village asks Geeta to help her murder her husband so she can be free like Geeta is. And then it goes from there. This has some real heavy themes and topics. I would check trigger warnings, but there's a lot of heavy topics. I will say my favorite thing about it so far is the like call and response about motherhood and parenting, where somebody will start to complain about something their children did or an aspect of parenting, and then somebody else will say, but it's such a blessing, and somebody will echo, oh yes, such a joy. And it's like this call and response anytime anybody says anything negative about having children, and the absurdity of it is so funny. And it's such a thing that I don't know if other countries do this, but I know this is in the United States, where like you cannot complain about parenting without adding that disclaimer of, oh, I love my children, but, oh, I wouldn't trade them for anything. But you're not just allowed to acknowledge that parenting is really hard, and sometimes it sucks, and there's not really a positive to counterbalance that negative part. Like sometimes that negative part is just negative, and no matter how much you love your children, it doesn't like make that negative thing go away. So I'm really enjoying that part of the commentary in this book. I'm really interested to see where we go with this. And this book is hard because there are some characters I really like, and there are some characters I really don't like, and I just want them to like go away. This will be my literary fiction for the year. Thank you. And I'm gonna need a lot of convincing to read another one because it is not my jam. Oddly enough, horror is now more my jam than literary fiction is. I don't know what happened. All right, we have 2 more books for what I'm currently reading. I'm gonna put up the thing here because I'm reading it on my Kobo, but I am also reading Naughty Brits. This is a romance anthology that came out in 2020. I bought it when it came out in 2020. I think the day it came out, I was so excited for it. And I promptly read Sarah MacLean's story in this and then didn't continue at all. So when I was going through my Kobo the other night looking for a book to start, I decided it was time to finish this. So I didn't reread Sarah MacLean's because I vaguely remembered it and didn't feel the need to go back. So I've read the Sophie Jordan short story, or it's not short story. These are long. These are not short stories. I think these are pushing novella lengths, which kind of going back to what I said about Plain House, I don't love any of these because they are novellas, and most of them, these characters are meeting in chapter 1 for the first time, and so it's a lot of insta love, which I understand kind of has to happen in a novella, but it's not my favorite, and I don't really dig it. So I read the Sophie Jordan book. Sophie Jordan is hard for me. I love the premise for a bunch of her books, but her execution doesn't usually work for me. It usually falls a little flat, and this is the third Sophie Jordan thing I've tried to read, and I think I just have to accept that she is not an author who works for me. And then I just finished the Louisa Edwards this morning, and it was fine. It was also a celebrity romance, so the hero was a celebrity and the heroine was just like a regular person, and I don't love celebrity romances either, so we'll see. I have 2 left. I have a Tessa Gratton story, and I've never read anything by her before, and then Sierra Simone, who I've read before and really liked, but right now I think this anthology is gonna be a like 3, maybe a 3.5. It's fine. And then the last thing I'm reading is The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez. If you follow me on Instagram, then you know I read The Vanished Birds last week, 2 weeks ago, and I loved it. Loved it so much, I promptly went out and bought a finished copy because I read it from the library, and I loved it so much. I will reread it. I needed a copy for my shelf so that next time I read it, I can like tab it as I go. And then very impulsively got The Spear Cuts Through. It's so shiny, I'm sorry. Got The Spear Cuts Through Water from the library, and I started it, and it's wildly different. It's not even the same genre. Vanished Birds is sci-fi. This one's fantasy. This one is told in a really disjointed kind of way, and I haven't quite figured out how the 2 POVs, like how they're gonna intersect yet, but I love his writing. I love his imagery, and I'm just so happy. I'm like reading this super slow because I just was so bummed when The Vanished Birds was over, and I know when I finish this, then I'm out of Simon Jimenez books to read, so I'm just trying to take it slow. The last thing is I would normally talk about what I want to read next, but I'm not quite sure where I'm going to go from here. I know I did my April TBR, and I have a bunch of Nebula books to read. I'm probably going to focus on finishing up the novellas that I need to read for that project, so I can do that video, and then I'll probably wait and read the novels a little bit later in the month because I have some other things coming in from the library that I would like to prioritize over the Nebula novels. And yeah, I'm just trying to mood read a little bit more this month, be a little bit more impulsive with what I pick up next, because I'm going through a in love with my physical TBR phase. Like I reorganized my bookshelf during spring break, and it makes it so much easier to see what I still haven't read, and it makes me really excited to look at the books and to see what is waiting for me, and to be reminded of that excitement I had when I purchased that book. So yeah, all right, I think that is it for this video. So thank you so much for spending your precious time with me. I really appreciate it. And if you would like to leave a comment down below, I would love to hear if you've read any of these other books, if any of them are on your radar, or what you have read in this first week of April. And then if you don't want to leave a comment but want to leave something, let's do some sort of water emoji. So like rain, ocean, I don't remember what else there is. Some sort of water emoji. for the spear cuts through water. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you in the next one. Bye.